All right, hello, math fans. All right, so today we're going to talk about something, two formulas actually, and the first one is called the distance formula. And I'll tell you, this is probably the one formula that you'll have to know for this class, for next year, for geometry, probably for Algebra 2, and for pre-calculus and trigonometry. Okay, you're going to have to know this formula all 4 years. It's probably on the final all 4 years. It's a super important formula. Okay, and the distance formula is actually based off of the Pythagorean theorem. Let me just give this to you first. Okay, so the distance equals the square root, and it's going to look complicated, and you're going to all go, oh, man, we have to learn this. Okay, but I'm going to give you an easy way to memorize this. Okay, so it's x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. That is the distance formula. All right, so it's what's going to happen now. Use the distance formula to find the distance between two coordinates, and the coordinates are going to be x1 comma y1 and x2 comma y2. All right, so you're going to be given 2 points, and that's how you're going to find the distance between those 2 points. And just real quickly, if I would label some points here, here's a point here, and let's call that our x1, y1. And then let's see, I'll do a point right over here. Okay, so I want to find the distance between these 2 points. All right, do you guys agree that I can draw this distance? So the first distance right here, okay, the first one that I'm sketching here, that's the difference of the x's, right? So, for example, just to kind of, again, help to come up with how we get this formula here, if that coordinate is 1, comma 1, and this coordinate right here, the distance between is 1, 2, 3. And this point here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, comma 1. Do you guys agree to find this distance here? I subtract the x's, right? It's 4 minus 1. So that gives me 3. I'm just going to write it in there. Okay, that's that distance. And then to find this distance here between here and here, let's look at this point. We know that's 4, 1, and we know this coordinate on top here is, right here, is 4, comma 3. So if I want to find the y distance going up and down, isn't that just going to be 3 minus 1? Isn't that 2? So if you notice what I did here, math fans, let me highlight it here, right? I found the difference of the x's is 3, and the difference of the y's is 2. Okay? And if you notice what I have here is I have a right triangle. Right? Doesn't that form a right triangle right there? So can I just use a squared plus b squared equals c squared to figure out this distance, to find out c squared? Okay, and then I take the square root and I get c. So here it is. It's a difference of the x's. So this is your a squared plus your b squared and the square root of that is, it's kind of like, here, let me write it out. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. All right, so once I do all this work here and figure those values out, don't I take the square root of both sides after I add them together? And that's what I have to do. I need to add these guys together first, and then I take the square root and I get my C value of C, or in this case here I call it the distance formula D. All right, and some of you might say, well, you know, what happens if you have a negative? It doesn't matter, right? What happens when I have a negative? What happens when you square a negative? When you square a negative, you always get a positive value. So you'll never have a negative under that square root. All right, so let's talk about how to learn this. I'm going to write this out here again. D is equal to, I just kind of derived it. You don't really need to know how to do that, but I want to show you a little bit where it came from. X2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, I say this is a sassy formula. Okay, it's a sassy formula. And you're like, what, a sassy formula? Because, you know, this is where the kids get confused the most. They get confused on whether to put pluses and minuses and pluses, where to put them. So I say it's a sassy formula. So it's subtract, add, subtract. S-A-S-S-Y. Okay, sassy formula. That's how you remember that. Subtract, add, subtract. And don't forget to square the terms. Okay, I mean, you have to memorize a few things here. So you use difference of the x's, difference of the y's, and you square those, and then you add them together. And then don't forget to take the square root. So let's start out with a normal problem here. Okay, and practice. So find the distance between, between 2 comma 4 and negative 4 comma 2. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to do this. All right, and it's really important that you just write it out like this. Okay, I've not led you wrong before. Make sure you write it out like this, and you're going to be guaranteed a success here. All right, well, almost guaranteed. So I'm going to write out the skeleton. Subtract, add, subtract. Okay, that's all you need to do. Send this out a little bit. And if you want to label it, x1, y1, x2, y2, that's great. Okay, so let's plug it in. X2 minus x1. Now you're like, well, Mr. Curvis, I don't understand. How do I know which one's first and which one's second? Does it really matter? If I let me just draw a quick sketch here. If I have a coordinate here and I have a coordinate here, and I said, hey, what's the distance between it? If I say, well, let's go this way, and I said, oh, the distance is 5 meters or 5 units. Okay, isn't the distance going this way also 5? Oops, right? It doesn't matter which way you go. That's the whole point. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's first and what's second. Kind of like the slope. It doesn't matter which first and what is second. All right, so x2 minus x1. So negative 4. I'm just going to plug things in. Negative 4 and 2. Okay, negative 4 and 2. y2 minus y1. 2 and 4. All right? So negative, let's just combine it. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6 squared. Plus 2 minus 4 is negative 2 squared. All right? Now let's square it. And guys, whenever you square it, it becomes positive automatically. So as opposed to even typing in negative 6 in your calculator, just type in 6 squared. That's fine. So you get 36. 2 squared is 4. So distance equals the square root of 40. All right? And now there are two ways I'm going to ask you for a solution. One is an exact answer. And you guys should remember with an exact answer, that's 4 times 10 or 2 root 10. So that's exact. If I ask you to round it to 2 decimal places, you type this in your calculator. Right, the square root of 40. You could do 2 root 10 too, But why not just type in what you have here, the earlier one. So the square root of 40 gives you 6.32, get it right out here, 6.3245, 5, blah, 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 okay? If I ask you to round to there's two places, right, you always look at this one, and it's a 4, so you keep this number the same. So my answer is 6.32. Okay, let's try that again. Try another problem. It's really not that bad, though. Okay, here's your 2 points. 1, negative 4, and negative 5, comma, negative 2. So our distance formula, write it out, write the skeleton out, like this. Subtract, add, subtract. Okay, so let's just, and again, if you want to label this, x1, y1, x2, y2. So x2, negative 5, and 1, and negative 2, and negative 4. Okay, just kind of directly plug it in. So d is equal to, let's keep simplifying, so negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6, plus, and you got to be careful, I don't care if you use your calculator or whatever you do, watch your signs though. So now it's negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. So we have 36 plus 4, that gives us a square root of 40, which actually is the same thing as we did before. Okay, just different values. No big deal. So it's 2 root 10 or 6.32. Okay? All right, let's try a few more here. Coordinates are 5, comma, negative 2, and 3, comma, 0. Okay, so x1, y1, x2, y2. So distance equals square root of squared, squared, sassy formula, subtract, add, subtract. So x2 minus x1, 3 and 5, and 0 and negative 2. Okay, the nice thing about it is you really can't mess it up. You know, if you put one first or the other one first, it doesn't matter because when you square it, it still becomes positive at the same value. Okay, so it's kind of nice, almost a little foolproof. Okay, 3 minus 5, negative 2. And that is positive 2. So we get 4 plus 4. So distance is the square root of 8, which is 2 root 2. Okay, and again, I would use that. So this is an exact answer. And I would use the 2 root 2, or I'm sorry, I would use the square root of 8 to come up with my answer. And so the answer is let me write a couple of answers here, 2.8284. And that number is bigger than 5, or 5 is bigger, so you round this up so it's equal to 2.83. Okay, you guys have to worry about rounding though, because I will take off a point if you do not round correctly. Okay, it's a bad way to lose a point, okay, because you're doing all this work and just by rounding, but that's part of the deal, is you got to know how to round. All right, so let's try another problem here. Negative 7, comma 5, and negative 10, comma, negative 1. Okay, so we got a lot of negatives in here. No big deal. Sassy formula, subtract, add, subtract. And x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so x2 minus x1, so negative 10, and negative 7, and negative 1, and 5. Okay, so that's going to be plus, right? So negative 10 plus 7 is negative 3. And negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6. So we have 9 plus 36. Okay, so that's equal to the square root of 45. And of course, our exact answer is 9 times 5, so it's 3 root 5. That's our exact answer. And if you put in your calculator the square root of 45, you get D is equal to 6.7082, which is rounding to 2 places is 6.71, because that's bigger than 5 and bigger. All right? That's it. That's the distance formula. And be careful what I'm asking for. Exact answers versus, rounded to the nearest decimal place. All right? Second part of the lesson is called the midpoint formula. All right? Midpoint formula is if I give you a point here and I give you a point here, I want to know what point's in the middle. That's all I'm looking for. So I want to figure out what this point is. So you're going to give me your final answer is going to be x comma y. That's going to be an answer as a coordinate. It's a midpoint. All right. So it's kind of like if I give you guys a test and I ask you what's the middle of your test, what is the same thing as middle? If you have a test and you have got an 80% on one and you got a 90% on another, and I ask you for the midpoint, what do? Isn't the same thing as finding the average? And how do you find the average between 2 points? Isn't it, don't you add them together? So don't you do 80 plus 90 and divide it by 2? So you got 170 over 2, which is 85. Okay? It's the average. And that's all the midpoint formula is. In fact, I don't even want you to memorize that formula, because to me, the distance formula, you kind of need to memorize it. With the midpoint formula, it's just something else to memorize. Remember, midpoint means the average of 2 points. Okay, average of 2 points. So this is the official formula. x1 plus x2, you add the x's together, you divide by 2. It's the average of the x's, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. So it's the average of the x's and the average of the y's. That's all it is. You add the x's together and you add the y's together. Nothing fancy about it. You don't even have to memorize this formula. I won't even ask you what that formula is, but you have to basically know how to use it. So let's just start out with the problem here. Negative 1 comma 5 and negative 7 comma negative 1. And I want you to find the midpoint. Okay, well, it's the average of the x's. So you literally take the x's, negative 1 minus 7 over 2, comma, y's, 5, and it's really plus, right? It's saying negative 1 plus a negative 7 or negative 1 minus 7. So basically you just stick with the sign. So this next one is 5 plus a negative 1, or 5 minus 1 over 2. Okay, then you have to simplify it. So negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8 over 2, comma, 5 minus 1 is 4 over 2. And then you have to simplify. Always have to simplify. Negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. 4 over 2 is 2. So it's negative 4 comma 2, and that's your answer. Okay, that's the midpoint of those 2 points. All right, let's try another one here. 0 comma 8 and 6 comma negative 2. Okay, again, it's really easy. You add the x's together, so 0 plus 6 over 2, and add the y's together. 8 plus negative 2, or 8 minus 2 over 2. So easy. 6 over 2 is 3. All right, I kind of just did a little work together here really fast. 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 over 2 is 3. There we go. 3 comma 3 is the middle of those 2 points. Okay, let's try another one here. Negative 11 comma 2 and 7 comma negative 8. Okay, so add the x's together. Negative 11 plus 7 over 2 and 2 minus 8 over 2. So negative 11 plus 7 is negative 4. And 2 minus 8 is negative 6. All right, and negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. Negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. There's midpoint. Now what happens if you have a fraction? No big deal. Let's give you one that's going to come up to be a fraction. 2 comma 7 and negative 3 comma 6. Okay, no big deal. 2 minus 3 over 2, comma 7 plus 6 over 2, right? You add them together. So 2 minus 3 is negative 1, and 7 plus 6 is 13. Now the only thing I want you guys to do, and it's a lot easier when you're trying to plot a point, is you want to give me as a mixed fraction. So, of course, the negative 1/2 stays the way it is, and 13 halves, you can even divide it in your calculator, 13 divided by 2, and I think your calculator might give you 6.5. But 13 divided by 2, as a decimal, you get 6.5. You should know how to put that as a fraction then, right? Isn't that 6 and 1/2? Okay, no decimals. So I'm going to put on here, no decimals. If you guys give me a decimal, you're going to lose 1 point. So if you write negative 0.5 and 6.5, I can take a point off. I want to see a fraction on there. Okay? So that's it. That's the business formula. It's a midpoint formula. Okay, that's not too bad. Hope you guys learned something here. Have a nice day, math fans. Adios. Goodbye.